Hello, hello. Welcome to the podcast. Okay, today we are going to dive into nervous system self care. And this is part 3 of an 8-part series where we are diving into self care practices in times of injustice and rising fascism, not for the purpose of fear, but for the purpose of being and feeling so equipped to care for ourselves and empowered in our own self care, no matter what is happening in the world, but especially when there are things that are happening in the world that we are experiencing, navigating as a collective, along with everything else that you are navigating in your day to day. Okay, so without further ado, welcome. We are going to be talking about nervous system self care. And let me do a quick recap. So, this is part 3. In part 1, we talked all about being gentle with yourself and how important that is and why that matters. It matters so much that I kicked off this entire series focused entirely on why it matters to be gentle with ourselves. Part 2, I talked about emotional self-care, emotional processing, which is also, of course, extremely important and essential. And if you're just jumping into the series and you haven't heard part 1 or part 2, I highly, highly recommend that you start with episode 1. So that's definitely my recommendation, to start with part 1 to really set a solid, sturdy foundation for the rest of the conversations in this in-depth series. Okay. So, fair warning. Want to give you fair warning. In this episode, I am going to be talking about some heavier things. I'm going to be talking about things that, for one reason or another, press our safety button and therefore triggering a nervous system response. And in order to do that, we've got to talk about these things. And I want to share examples so that we can really talk about this and unpack it in a practical way and not just in theory and, what it would sound like if we're reading about it in a textbook, but actually apply it to real life and real life examples, real life situations. So I just want to give you fair warning, but hang in there with me as we navigate some of these heavier things, because it's a part of what so many of us are navigating. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, the purpose, the mission, my whole entire reason for even sitting and recording these episodes is that we feel equipped to take care of ourselves as needed in the ways that are so necessary, essential, and needed. And that for so many of us, we never learned this. We weren't taught it. But now, as adults, we're able to learn these things and understand these things for ourselves and equip ourselves with these strategies and tools and supports that actually address our needs. And nervous system self-care is so important. And honestly, I really should have made this episode about nervous system care part 2, because it is so foundational. Even it can think of it as primitive, foundational, instinctual. And in some cases, I've most certainly experienced this, and I'm going to share a couple of examples. In some cases, I would even say nervous system care, nervous system self-care has to happen first. It has to happen first before we can even do emotional processing, because in some situations, in some circumstances, not always. So discernment is definitely going to come into play here. And so absolutely bring your best discernment. That's always true for anything that I teach or share with you, because we're all so different and every situation is different. But in many cases, accessing safety first is going to be required before we're then able to go and process emotions or what am I feeling. And so that's actually a really perfect segue for what the F is nervous system. I remember when I first started learning about nervous system and deeply studying nervous system, but even just understanding what the F is nervous system. And so let's actually start there. Let's take a couple steps back and back it up a little bit and talk about what is the nervous system. The nervous system is our body's communication network. That's one way you can think of it. It's made up of our brain, spinal cord, and the nerves that run all throughout our body. And the nervous system and these different parts that make up our nervous system are constantly sending and receiving signals that tell our body how to move, breathe, digest, and respond to stress. And so when we're talking about nervous system, we're not talking about our conscious thought about something. It's the part of you that reacts and responds before your mind even has a chance to catch up, is a good way to put it. For example, let's say someone's messing with you and you're walking down the hallway and they jump in front of you and you scream and your heart's racing and your breathing changes and your body is responding automatically to someone having jumped out in front of you, even though you're actually not under any threat because it's your friend just messing with you. And so you haven't had the chance yet, your brain hasn't had the chance yet to be like, oh, this is my friend just being a jerk or messing with me. I'm actually safe. We're actually hanging out. We're actually having a good time. This is your nervous system response. It's your nervous system responding to what it is interpreting as dangerous or as a threat. And so literally your body reacts and responds. And I think that's a really good example to illustrate what we're talking about when we're talking about nervous system. And so when we talk about nervous system self-care, what we're really talking about is practices, which I am going to be sharing with you, specific practices that calm, regulate, and support this entire nervous system network. Once your body has had a response to stress, to a situation, to a headline, to something that's happening at your workplace, in your home, in the world, once your body has had a response, but then you've been able to assess what the situation is or to what level you're affected, how do we then care for our nervous system? Because if you think about it, even in the example that I shared where a friend, is just messing with you and they jump out in front of you and now your heart is racing and you've screamed at the top of your lungs and your heart feels like it's going to jump out of your chest. That's a lot of work for your body and it has a purpose. We are definitely going to talk about this because it's very important to really see why this is here for us. And of course, I'm going to be sharing examples because this is my entire purpose when I thought about putting together this series and sitting down and recording each of these episodes for you. I really wanted to share how am I deepening my self-care, how my self-care has deepened, like it has taken deeper root during these times. Okay, so let's connect some dots here. We are talking about self-care during times of injustice, violence, oppression, etc. When we witness injustice, so when your eyes see something, your ears hear something, you read a headline, when we witness in any way things such as injustice, violence, our nervous systems get activated. That completely makes sense, right? I mean, if someone in front of you just messing with you activates your nervous system, of course, it makes sense. If we are witnessing with our eyes, whether it's a headline or any other version of witnessing these things, our nervous system being activated, this completely makes sense. This is literally our nervous system's job. Our nervous system's job is essentially, if we boil it down to just a few words, to keep us alive. It's scanning for danger, for threats, for life-threatening, potentially dangerous things. And then there's a response to prepare your body. That's why your heart rate goes up. It's like getting you ready to potentially run if you need to run, etc. I'm definitely giving the simplified version of this. And if we are witnessing things and taking in data, information, or inputs where our nervous system is being activated a lot and often, and maybe every day, maybe multiple times a day, nervous system self-care is really important because this is going to keep us from essentially staying in overdrive, staying with that elevated heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. Additionally, nervous system self-care also allows us to signal to our brain when it makes sense to do so, because this is not in every situation. In some situations, it's going to make sense that your nervous system is activated and maybe you literally need to run, right? I'm just giving an example. But let's say you are in the safety of your home and you're reading a headline, one that, by the way, completely makes sense why your nervous system would feel activated. However, you are in your home, you are in that moment safe, what these nervous system strategies also allow us to do, not only self-care so that we're not staying in overdrive, which is exhausting. Imagine your body at a physical level, how exhausting that. We're not meant to be, our nervous systems be activated 24/7. That's not what it is designed for or meant to do. So these nervous system strategies we're able to use so that we don't stay activated and or stay in overdrive when it is not necessary. When we discern, when you discern, when I discern, and we each get to do that in our situation, on a case-to-case basis, so that we don't stay in that fight or flight. We're not staying in that overdrive activated state, because that will be exhausting to stay in that state when you're assessing, like, actually, I am safe or I'm safe enough. For example, one strategy that you can use for nervous system care, so that in order to calm your nervous system, regulate your nervous system, is deep breathing or even slowing your breathing. By doing that, you signal to your brain, you're sending the signal to your brain, your nervous system, that you are safe, that you are actually safe and or safe enough. And so when it makes sense to do so, and you get to discern this as part of your self-care, it is using these nervous system strategies and tools to be able to access emotional safety and not stay in overdrive. Again, when it makes sense to do so will depend on the situation, because remember, nervous system does have a job, but it is also exhausting. And you're probably already connecting these dots in your mind as you're listening. If every time that we get a ding on the smartphone with a headline, you're noticing yourself going into fight or flight and your heart rate elevating, when that is what we're experiencing on a day-to-day, that's going to be exhausting, even at a physical level, at a nervous system level. And it's why we're talking about nervous system self-care. So now what I want to do is share a couple of my own examples with you. And then I'll close the episode with sharing 3 simple but very, very effective strategies for nervous system self-care, nervous system regulation. Each of these examples I want to share with you are going to kind of do a job. I've picked them very intentionally. The first example that I want to share with you is I want to share an experience that I had where my nervous system did its job. And this was one of these examples where it's like my nervous system was doing its job. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I'm so thankful. And this example just really beautifully illustrates both the role of the nervous system so that we can hold this deep appreciation for it, and also how and when, and that we each get to discern when nervous system care comes into play, can come into play. Okay, so a few years back, it's been at least 3-4 years, there was this completely random situation that happened in our neighborhood. We didn't know this at the time, but there was a property right down the street that was being utilized as an Airbnb. We knew it was being utilized as an Airbnb, but what we didn't know is that there was going to be some people that rented the Airbnb that then decided to have a crazy house party. And let me make this story short, but essentially, we found these details out later, like a couple of days later. Essentially, there was a wild party, because like this kind of stuff does not happen in our old neighborhood. So the Airbnb property, some, people rented the property. They were having a party. I guess things got crazy and violent at the party. There were guns involved. There was shooting involved. Thankfully, no one died. But whoever was involved in those shenanigans apparently then decided to drive off, just randomly shooting at the houses all down the street and like through the neighborhood. It was terrifying. And here's the part that I want to share with you. So like I said, please don't worry, this happened years ago in our old neighborhood, and it was nothing like that ever happened the entire time we were living there for almost 10 years. Let me take you to that night, because here's why I want to share this with you. I was like deep asleep, just resting, as one does in the middle of the night. I believe it was like 1 a.m. I do remember because I'll never forget this night. It was really intense. So it was like 1 a.m. We're deep asleep. The house is quiet, the neighborhood is quiet. Before my mind understood what was happening, I just remember popping out of bed, running to Gianna's room, throwing myself, because Gianna was a little tiny baby still then, throwing myself over her like to protect her. And even as my body had already done all of that, my mind was still processing like what the heck was happening. At that moment, I still hadn't even processed in my mind like, oh, that's the sound of bullets. That was my nervous system response. That was my body responding. My heart was racing. I ran I don't think I've ever ran that fast in my life. And that is a nervous system response. This is what I said earlier. It's like almost animalistic. Until I experienced that moment, I had never lived anything like this before. That was a lived experience that I can share with you that I will never forget of what the nervous system is here to do. Even as I'm sharing this story with you, I am filled with a deep reverence, deep just in awe. For like weeks after, I was just so in awe. The nervous system, my nervous system, like how before my brain was even like, I remember being there in Gianna's room, like hearing these sounds and still just kind of processing like, what is that? And while my body had already fully responded that there was a threat and that action was needed. And so I share that story, not for it to be like triggering, but I did give a warning at the beginning. But truly, because I hope you can hear it in my voice. Oh my gosh, my sense of reverence for the job of our nervous system and just deeply understanding like, oh, this is why this part is here. And thank you. Just like deeply, deeply thank you. I invite you right now to just come into this moment of deep appreciation, even with me, for your nervous system, for your body, for your mind, for all of you. All these different parts of us, they all have such essential and sacred roles that they are playing. And what I love also, though, is that we can educate ourselves and inform ourselves so that we can understand these different parts and pieces of all the things that make us whole, which our nervous system is part of us. My nervous system is part of me. Your nervous system is part of you, so that we can take care of ourselves as needed. So now let me share with you kind of what unfolded the rest of that day. And even over the next few days, it was very interesting to notice. So for example, of course, I did not sleep for even one half of a second, right? For the rest of the night, understandably so. And then everything, like I said, thankfully, no one was hurt. No one in the neighborhood was hurt. And then later we found out all the details and we were able to understand like what the heck happened. But even then, understanding what happened, intellectually having that information, it was really interesting to notice that, for example, the next night, even though I intellectually understood that situation was not likely to repeat itself, I was also observing my nervous system on edge. I will give you one tiny example. If you have an AC in your home or even like a heater, I think for the most part, they all make this little kind of almost clicky sound or a sound when they're turning on or turning off, right? But when you're used to it, you don't even notice it. It's just part of the sounds of the different sounds that, a home makes. Typically, when I'm sleeping, if the AC or the heater turns on and off, it's not a thing that wakes me up because it's part of the sounds that my body, me, are used to. And these little sounds are not interpreted as anything, that we need to do anything about. Well, probably for about a week or so after this incident, every single time, because it was in the wintertime, I remember every single time the heater like clicked on or off, especially in the first days following, my whole body would like tense up and my eyes would pop open and my heart would race and I would wake up and I was like, oh, my nervous system is on high alert. And again, for good reason. And so then that was a great example. That's like a really great example of things we might notice if we are on high alert. This is a very kind of in your face example, but it is an example to start to bring attention and understand. And also, it's an example of where I then was able to say, okay, I can observe that my nervous system is on high alert. I also know that I'm safe. And that's when I can bring in some of these strategies and signal to my brain, signal to my nervous system, hey, we're actually safe. Thank you so much. I know you're doing your job. You're amazing. Thank you. I mean, you don't have to talk to yourself like that, but I do. That is part of my self-care in these situations, is some of this reassurance and loving and compassion and gratitude, especially after that situation where I deeply was, wow, my nervous system is pretty effing amazing. I was so impressed. I can't even put into words how impressed I was with that nervous system response. And of course, we've all heard and seen stories of parents where, their child is in danger and they moved something that is not physically possible for them to move and things like that. I am just eternally impressed with our nervous system and its role and its function. And okay, all of that to say, when I'm noticing my nervous system is in overdrive, but I'm actually safe, I utilize these nervous system techniques, strategies. We can also call them somatic practices. And soma means body. So we're using our body to signal to my brain, to signal to my nervous system, hey, we're actually safe. Hey, there's actually not an imminent threat. And I will share, I promise, I told you I was going to share 3 strategies. One of them is slowing your breathing or deep breathing. And that is because physiologically, if you are able to breathe slowly, deeply, or intentionally, your brain knows, hey, you're not running from a threat. So breathing, intentional breathing, slow breathing, deep breathing, whatever you want to call it. My other favorite, and I'm literally doing it as I'm talking with you, is bringing my hand to my heart. I bring my right hand over my heart. You can also think of this as self-holding, a self-holding practice, or I like to call this hand on heart. It's one of the techniques and strategies, somatic practices that I teach my clients as well. Actually, inside of the last 10 and inside of She Creates Freedom, my clients learn over a dozen, almost 20 different nervous system regulation strategies and somatic practices. So there's many different ways to do this. Today, I'm just going to share 3. And then for the third one, I'm going to say grounding practices. And grounding can look like a lot of different things, but I'm going to be super literal here of getting barefoot on the ground, letting your feet feel the ground. That's also called earthing sometimes, but there's so many different options for grounding practices, even just orienting to space and time, taking a breath and just looking around. Okay, I am in my home. I am safe. My puppy's right here next to me. All of this signals to your nervous system and your brain, hey, we are safe and or safe enough. That's a first example that I wanted to share with you. The other personal example that I wanted to share with you, I'm going to tie into our current climate and just more recent news and situations. So I actually want to share with you that in this most recent election, we were up watching the results come in and, feeling fairly hopeful. And then as it got later and later into the night, I don't remember exactly when, but there was a point where the results were really showing who was going to be the elect president. And for me, having that information was also at the same time processing so much of what I believed was going to come along with that, like these inhumane mass deportations and women's rights and so many other things. We won't even go down that rabbit hole right now. But mostly what I want to share with you is that night, once that information came in and once I was processing that, my heart was racing. I could feel my heart racing. I tried to go to bed. I really couldn't sleep. My heart was racing. And so that was a situation where I, of course, granted myself and allowed so much compassion. And that was a moment for me. I knew there wasn't imminent threat. I was in my house. I was safe. But I also could observe in my body that my nervous system was responding. And it made sense. It completely made sense. I understood why. I understood what my brain and my nervous system were interpreting as a threat. And this is one of those examples. It's why I am saying often in this episode, particularly, that we each must bring our discernment into what is actually supportive, because none of this is about gaslighting or erasing what it is that you're experiencing or what you're navigating in your life. So in this particular example, it's late night. I knew that I needed to get some rest. I also could feel my heart racing as I just was like interpreting the data that was coming in. I even understood like, hey, this makes sense why I'm feeling this way and having this response, but I also wanted to rest. And so what I did, and this is me sharing an example of nervous system care, was bring my hand to my heart. Even as I was laying in bed, bring my hand to my heart, intentionally slow my breathing so I could try to get some rest. As I'm sitting here this morning recording this episode, it is Monday, and we are just on the other side of a weekend where there was a lot of violence and different mass shootings that took place just over the weekend. And that's just to name two very real, current, real life examples of information, of news, of situations that our nervous systems are processing. But I invite you again, as always, to center your own experience. In your mind, you can identify what are some of the things that your nervous system has been responding to. And in some of those cases, it feels more true and more useful, and it makes sense to support yourself using these strategies and techniques and to signal to your brain, to communicate to your brain, hey, we're safe, I'm safe. In some cases, that feels true and useful and supportive. And there's other cases, other circumstances, other situations in which it may feel more true, more useful, more supportive to approach your nervous system care in a way that you're reassuring, I am safe enough in this moment. Because the truth is that some of these things that you're processing, perhaps they do affect you or may possibly affect you to some level, to some degree. And so it may be more useful, more resonant, more supportive. And just like you're not lying to yourself about the situation, that the most useful nervous system self-care in that moment may be, I am safe enough in this moment. That may be the most loving, supportive, and effective thing. So I wanted to make that distinction. And in all of this conversation, I've named the importance of discernment, bringing your discernment when it comes to your nervous system care and what it is that you're holding, what it is that you're navigating, how it is that you're feeling, what feels most supportive for you, for that specific situation. And so we could spend hours continuing to talk and share different examples, but I want to invite you to think about, and as I've been saying all throughout this series, center your experience. I invite you to think about one of your examples. What would nervous system care and self-care have looked like for you in those moments? You could even think about maybe there's something you're navigating or processing today. What would nervous system care look like for you? And I'm going to wrap up this episode on this note. I know that talking about these things, it's not light. It can feel heavy, but it's essential because it's needed. It's necessary. We are whole humans. So being able to address our needs at every level and in these challenging situations, it is essential. But I do want to let you know, as we are in the middle of the holidays, the next episode coming up is going to be a fun one, actually. We are going to be talking about pleasure and joy and comfort, because that is also incredibly important. And that's also an important part of us as a whole human. So we've talked so much about nervous system care today, and I'm so honored to be able to share how this has been so helpful for me, how these practices, whether it's emotional self-care or nervous system self-care or being kind to myself, how these practices have truly been my medicine during these times, and how my self-care has just taken deeper root in order to support myself as needed, especially when there was a time for so much of my life, or any time that there was something where there was stress or overwhelm, or I would feel anxious or worried or afraid. Food was absolutely my go-to coping mechanism. In hindsight, I can see how in so many of those moments, what I was really trying to reach for and desiring and wanting was to access a moment of that emotional safety. What I was really reaching for in so many of those moments was to access feeling calm, feeling regulated. And the more and more that I was able to understand my needs at these different levels, the more and more that I've been able to actually address my needs. My reason, my motivation for sharing, as we are navigating so much of this as a collective, to share, okay, here's how all of this has been helpful for me. Here's how I have deepened my self-care in all these different ways to really address my needs. And if you're listening to me and you're like, Brenda, everything you're saying is resonating, and I would really love to learn more about nervous system regulation, to have more tools in your pocket, and or that you would just love to have more support in this process, being supported as you learn and practice taking care of your nervous system and your emotions in these different ways, I absolutely would be honored to be in your corner, supporting you. There's a couple different ways you can work with me and come learn from me. One of those ways is my coaching community, The Last 10. And also I have my 30-day course, She Creates Freedom, which is focused specifically centering the experience of women of color and daughters of immigrants to create freedom from emotional eating and be able to address and heal any deep-rooted patterns. Everything is focused around transforming and healing that relationship with food. Go and check out the details. Go to brendalomelli.com. Like I said, I would be honored to be a support, to be in your corner, to support you at all the different levels as needed. So go to brendalomelli.com to get all the details and decide which one is the best match for you. So thank you for joining me today. I will see you in the next episode, and I will talk to you very soon.